Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Aircraftman Mark O'Dell. The first Wednesday of September each year marks the Battle for Australia Day. After Japan entered the war in December 1941, a generation of Australians left their homes to work or serve in the defence of their nation. Late 1941 and early 1942 was a dramatic time for Australia as Japanese forces moved swiftly southward through the Pacific. On the 15th of February 1942, Singapore fell to the Japanese and prompted Australia's Prime Minister, John Curtin, to declare that the battle for Australia had begun. Thousands of Australians were engaged in actions against Japanese forces, including those who served to defend the Australian mainland against attacks. Battle for Australia Day is a day for us to recognise those who served in the defence of the Australian mainland and in land, air and sea battles in the Coral Sea, Papua and New Guinea. These actions stopped the Japanese southward advance. Some 22,000 Australians became prisoners of the Japanese during the war, of whom some 8,000 lost their lives. This evening, we remember all those who died during the Battle for Australia and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour, and the survivors who returned home. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge His Excellency the Honourable David Hurley, Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, and Her Excellency Mrs Linda Hurley and the accompanying delegation. Admiral Teodor Lopez Calderon, Chief of Defence Staff, Spanish Navy, accompanied by Vice Admiral David Johnston, Vice Chief of the Defence Force and the accompanying delegation, and Vice Admiral Hiroshi Ogawa, Japan Maritime Self-Defence Force and the accompanying delegation. This evening, we are honoured to welcome Second World War veteran Mr Les Cook. Les enlisted with his father Ernest into the Army in 1940. To be able to enlist, both lied about their ages. Ernest put his age down by 4 years and Les put his up by 4. Les was in fact just 17 years of age on enlistment. Les served with the 2nd 14th Battalion in North Africa, Greece, Crete, Syria and in the Pacific, including Kokoda. He also served as part of the British Commonwealth Occupation Force in Japan. Les, we thank you for your service and for joining us here this evening. We also warmly welcome representatives of the Battle for Australia Commemoration National Council, the delegation from Bravery Trust. Bravery Trust provides financial support to veterans, current and former members of the Australian Defence Force and their families who have suffered injury or illness as a result of their service and are experiencing financial hardship. And the delegation from the Regional Strategic Communications Workshop, Cyber Warfare Division. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Nepean Christian School from Mulgoa, New South Wales. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult Party attention! Catapult Party present!
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult Party shoulder arms! Catapult Party order arms!
Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Reginald Hackshaw. Reginald Hackshaw was born on the 6th of May 1906 in Epsom, a town in North Surrey, about 24 kilometres south of central London. The Hackshaw family emigrated to Australia in late 1912. Henry, Rose and 9 children, Rose, Annie, May, Albert, Reginald, Janie, Beatrice, Gertrude and Alan, arrived in Fremantle. And the family made a home in Western Australia, where a further 5 children were born. The family lived for a time at Bellevue in eastern Perth, where Albert's father was employed by the Western Australian Government Railways. In 1925, the family moved to Bencombin and purchased property. But the family dreams of a successful farming venture weren't to be. Eventually, they joined the increasing number of Australians forced to walk off their land due to the economic collapse of the Great Depression. Low agricultural prices, rabbits, bad weather, and also inexperience. By the time that Reginald enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 10th of August 1940, he was working as a truck driver. He began training, soon moving to Northam Camp. In January, Private Hackshaw was transferred the reinforcements to the 2nd and 16th Battalion, and in February, he enjoyed a period of pre-embarkment leave. The following month, Hackshaw had some additional leave, marrying Elaine Henderson at St Paul's Church in Northam on the 8th of March 1941. The newlyweds did not have much time to enjoy together. However, as Hackshaw embarked for overseas service on the 16th of April 1941. Arriving in the Middle East a month later, Hackshaw undertook further training in Palestine. As a part of the 21st Brigade of the 7th Australian Division, the 2nd and 16th First Operation was to bolster forces' defences along the Egyptian and Libya frontier against an expected German attack. The men occupied positions at the Martin Bagush and Maurice Matruda throughout much of April and May in 1941, before returning to Palestine in preparation for the first offensive operation, the invasion of Syria and Lebanon. Beginning on the 8th of June, the battalion faced difficulty and costly actions against the well-entrenched Vichy troops, suffering the most casualty of the Australian battalions involved. They endured major battles, including the Latani River in early June, an unsuccessful attempt to capture Sedan in mid-June, and the siege of El Qatar Ridge as a part of the Battle of Damour in early July. After the armistice, the 2nd 16th remained in Lebanon as a part of the Allied garrison force. Sailing from Egypt at the end of January 1942, most of the battalion absent themselves without leave when their transport called briefly at Fremantle on the way to Adelaide. But Hackshaw's stay in Australia eventually would come to an end. On the 12th of August, he and his battalion arrived at Port Moresby in Papua. And by the end of the month, they were in action against the Japanese on the Kokoda Trail. On the 31st of August, the battalion was near a ridge south of the villa of Alola, having been involved in the fighting and assisting the 2nd 14th Battalion to withdraw from their position. That afternoon, the men heard the war cries of the Japanese soldiers occupying the positions they just evacuated. With the enemy pressing against their retreat and the men defending in depth, the battalion made its way to the Irora Creek. Private Reginald Hackshaw would not live to continue the withdrawal. He had been killed in action on the 1st of September 1942. He was 36 years old. Buried near where he fell, his remains were later reburied in Port Moresby War Cemetery, where they remain today under the inscription chosen by his grieving widow, "I miss you sadly, my beloved husband." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Reginald Hackshaw who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left to grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Catapult party, present, arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, inwards, turn. Catapult party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.